Hazel Hart is with us today. She is going to read from her new teen novel, The Survivalist's Daughter. In the book, she touches on a number of current social issues, one of which is parental kidnapping.
Thank you, Bonnie. I'm going to be reading, as Bonnie said, from my new young adult novel. And the topic that I'm looking at today is parental kidnappings. I was shocked to find out that there are over 200,000 parental kidnappings a year. Most of the children get returned to their left behind parent relatively soon, but a few, like Kindra, end up not knowing they've been kidnapped because they were small children when they were taken. This particular scene follows an FBI raid on her home where her father was arrested, and she's been questioned by the FBI. Up until this point, she knows nothing about the kidnapping. Footsteps echoed in the hallway and stopped just outside the room. My stomach cramped. Agent Epperson was probably standing out there, thinking of ways to make me say my father was a white supremacist and a traitor to his country, but I never would. God, country, family, they were everything to him. He only wanted to protect the rights of everyone and keep invaders from taking over and destroying what the founding fathers had made. As the door opened, I steeled myself for more questions. This time, I was ready. This time, I would tell Agent Epperson or anyone else who questioned me that the Constitution said people had the right to bear arms. My father hadn't broken any laws, and he hadn't killed anyone, not like they had, surrounding my home and killing my mother. I had been numb with shock yesterday, but today I had a lot to say, and I wasn't going to let anyone bully me. Agent Epperson entered the room, looking much the same as she had the day before. She changed from a light gray suit to a dark blue one. Every strand of her short red hair was in place, and her mouth was set in a determined line. My father had often talked about government men. It turned out there were also government women, and they were just as ruthless as the men. I reminded myself of my vow to stand up to Agent Epperson and braced for another round of questioning. "Get your shoes on," Agent Epperson ordered. "Your mother's here to see you." Fury boiled up in me. "You murdered my mother." I gulped and air lodged in my chest. The image of my mother's bullet-ridden body on the ground and the photographer snapping pictures flooded my mind. I choked and coughed. When my throat finally cleared, I stared into the agent's eyes, fighting to keep my emotions in check, but I couldn't stop my voice from shaking. Mom's last words were that she'd watch out for Michael and me from heaven, and you can't stop her. I wiped away tears, angry for letting this woman get to me. My mom's spirit is with me now, helping me, and I'll never say anything bad about my parents, so you may as well give up. Agent Epperson nodded, her lips forming a tight, smirking smile. "It turns out those wonderful parents of yours lied to you your whole life. The woman in my office, Margot Jorgensen, says she's your mother, and she has the paperwork to prove it." Reuniting with the left-behind parent often isn't smooth, and particularly in this instance where Kindra had no idea that anyone except the woman she'd always known as Mom was her mother, makes it very difficult for her to accept. In this particular section, we're going to take a look at Kindra getting her first glimpse of her real mother. I glanced through a plate glass window next to the door, wanting to see the woman claiming to be my mother before confronting her. But it wasn't the woman who captured my attention. It was the man. "Dad," I whispered, not believing what I was seeing. The man looked exactly like my father, except his blonde hair was about an inch longer than Dad's buzz cut. And my father wouldn't have been holding some other woman in his arms. wouldn't have been kissing her cheek, wouldn't have been. Agent Epperson shoved the door open. "Let's go." She pushed me into the room. The two people turned to face us. The woman sobbed at the sight of me, and blue eyes shining, she pressed her hands to her heart. She crossed the room quickly and threw her arms around me. "At last," she said as she crushed me to her chest. I stood woodenly in her strong embrace, staring past her shoulder as the man who so closely resembled my father looked on. My mind reeled with questions, but I was certain there was no truth to be had from either of these strangers. The fake mother finally released me and held me at arm's length, stroking my hair and cheek. "Kindra, you're okay, thank God." I froze as I got my first look at the face of the person claiming to be my mother. We had the same blue eyes and strong cheekbones and straight blonde hair. How had the government in such a short time found someone who looked so much like me physically? She pulled me in close for another hug. I stiffened and pulled away, my eyes narrowing as I turned toward the man and studied his face. I now saw more evidence that he was not my father. Dad had a scar on his forehead where a bullet had grazed him when he was in the Gulf War. They had missed duplicating that scar on his look-alike. The imposter claiming to be my mother released me and touched my forehead, pushing a stray strand of hair from my face. "You're safe now." I backed away, my eyes darting between the woman and the man. "Who are you people? Where did they find you?" My gaze locked on the man. I glared at him. "How did they make you look like my father?" He took a step toward me, his eyes holding that same concerned look I had so often seen in my father's face when he had something to explain to me. "I look like your dad because he's my twin brother, and this is your mother. We've come to take you home." "All of my dad's family's dead. Mom's too. They're orphans." I backed against the wall, wanting to run, but knowing I wouldn't get far, maybe not even out of the room. They'd catch me, and who knew what they'd do to me then? "If you want me to believe what you're saying is true, you have to let me talk to my dad. He has to tell me that you really are who you say you are." "They won't let us see him," the woman said, "but they will let us take you home." "Us?" I frowned and glanced from one to the other. "To the same house?" Dad's twin stood behind the woman claiming to be my mother and put his left hand on her shoulder. She reached up and clasped his fingers. I saw they were wearing matching wedding bands. "You're married? To each other?" If they really were my mother and uncle, the idea of them being married was revolting, like incest. "Yes," the woman said, I thrust out my palm. "Stop." I spun around and glared at Agent Epperson. My supposed mother is married to a man claiming to be my uncle and my dad's twin brother? How sick is that? I looked from Agent Epperson to the man and woman. "Who came up with that story?" My mother sighed. "It's not a story, dear. It's true. I'm Margot Jorgensen. I'm your mother. We'll explain everything after we get you home and you meet your sisters." Sisters? Older sisters? They had to be older. Surely the government didn't recruit kids for agents. "Younger," Margot Jorgensen said. "Kelsey is 15, and she's your full sister. Then there are your half-sisters. Sandra's 11, and Cindy's 10. While Margot Jorgensen kept talking, I tried to wrap my mind around all this family. "They're in shock too, you know," Margot said. "They just found out about you last night when we saw the TV news report of your father's arrest. Kelsey has always thought Brian was her father, so she calls him Dad." Margot teared up. Kindra's rejection of her mother continues on the drive home to Kansas. This actually started in Colorado. I didn't mention that before. and they have stopped at a McDonald's to eat, and they are now in the restroom. Margot stroked my hair. I pulled away again. I could see the hurt on her face, but I couldn't help it. I didn't like strangers being so familiar, no matter how nice they tried to be or who they said they were. I don't know what to call you, either of you, I said. I'm your mother. Margot's voice broke. I'm your mother. Her jaw tightened and her blue eyes flashed in anger. My whole body stiffened at her claim. Hannah is my mother, and she's dead. My voice broke. I stopped and swallowed hard before going on. Government agents shot her to death in front of our house. Government agents took my baby brother and won't let me see him. Government agents questioned me for hours and said Dad is some kind of terrorist when he's not. Now government agents say we are related. Why would I trust them? Why would I trust you? Margot pressed her hands against the sides of my head and turned my face to the mirror. She pressed her cheek against mine. Look at us, she ordered. I glared at our reflected images. So they found someone who looks like me. There must be lots of blondes with blue eyes around, with eyes and cheekbones and lips the same shape. And what about Brian? He's your father's identical twin. You are not my mother. What should I call you? Margot. Her shoulders slumped. Just call me Margot.